Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we'll be talking with someone who has dedicated his life to purposefully sharing his profound connection with animals, their environment, and the earth with the rest of us. He is guide and leader in the truest of senses. Rich De Gouveia, founder of Arc Earth, a specialized guide group that creates meaningful safari experiences exploring the environment, animals, and the ecosystem of Africa. After a life-changing event, Rich cut ties with his job, financial security, for a life of passion in the African bush. His team at Arc Earth leads photographic and private safaris, as well as conservation-based, purpose-driven trips. Listening and talking with Rich, I can literally feel his passion and purpose. He lives in Portugal with his wife and 2 boys, but spends 200 days per year guiding trips in Africa. Rich is someone that is truly living his calling. He is a gift to the rest of us, and I cannot wait to share this story with you. Rich, welcome to the campfire.
Scott, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today. And thank you for that awesome intro. Wow.
Oh my gosh. I just got lost in watching some of your content yesterday. It is so inspiring, so amazing. And I just want to bring listeners into this story because it's just epic. Rich, if we can just start, just to bring people up to speed, if you could begin by sharing with us what Arc Adventure is.
So Arc Earth is a travel company that myself and my business partner, Matt Meyer, started a few years ago. We've both been guiding for a long, long time. I've been in the field for 15 years, and we decided that we were going to try and create something of our own, something of a legacy for us and for our children, and a means to get our kids to see what we do. As a guide, we spend a lot of time with guests and giving our energy to those guests. But in the greatest sense, we want to build something that we can take our families to see the things we take guests to see. And the greatest way to facilitate that is to give people amazing experiences that they go home with, that they can take back memories and feel like they've had a life-changing experience to share with the rest of the world.
It's so powerful. So I want to explore a couple of the things behind the name Arc Earth and your mission, which is travel with purpose. And maybe we could just start with travel with purpose. So what does that mean to you guys?
So for us, travel has become synonymous with people trying to explore the world and do and gain as many memories as possible. For us, we want to create something that drives people to gain those memories, but also feel like they're leaving a mark and bettering the place that they went to. I think in this day and age, there's so much travel where the negatives of too much tourism is kicking in. And we would like people to go and see spaces and feel like they've helped a rhino that could have been poached, or visited a school, or assisted a young children in getting educated so that they can be the next ambassadors for Africa and for wildlife and moving the peg forward. So it's a basic paying it forward and getting to experience something amazing at the same time.
Wow, that's awesome. I wonder if you could go into a little bit more detail about what that looks like in terms of this pay it forward and some of the experiences that you all kind of lead and guide to help people leave a positive mark.
Totally. Well, just being on these holidays and being on safari has its own positive impact, because what we're effectively doing is we're creating a value for those animals that means that they are more valuable alive than dead. And this changes the perceptions of people around those areas, including the fact that you're training staff to be in lodges. We're training up guides. We're using local guides. We might be there, but we've always got a local guide that assists us. I don't ever want to take a job away from someone. If anything, I want to empower somebody to take my job one day, because that's just a way of paying it forward. And then on top of that, we do conservation activities. So there's a couple of different things where we dart pangolin, and we put little radio receivers on them so they can be followed and looked after and studied. And this is a big thing because it's the most trafficked animal in Africa. And then we have rhinos, where we take people on rhino experiences where they get to be part and hands-on with an experience where we dart a rhino. The vets are there, but they oversee the guests pulling bloods and giving meds and doing ear notches and taking DNA samples. So they're hands-on with these things, and they really feel like they're spending their money on something positive while getting to touch a rhino. I mean, how many people can say that they do that?
Yeah, that's really amazing. So people can participate in a safari adventure with you, but also participate in these conservation efforts as part of that trip.
Very much, very much. And that's what we try and encourage. Not all trips have that. Not everyone's up for that. But as long as we're doing a little piece of that with a majority of our guests, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. And then as a kickback, we have committed to being at least a 1% company now and growing to a 4% company, where we give back and we feed back into the system. So last year, we gave a bunch of funds to 3 different African schooling systems that are training kids and helping kids understand the wildlife around them better, so that they create this beautiful connection with the wildlife and the nature around them, that they too become ambassadors and want to save these things going forward.
Yeah. One of the videos that you shared with me, or maybe I just found on your channel, was you and a group of people were involved in darting a rhino to tag him. And I'm curious, was that part of one of your expeditions?
Very much, very much. So it's on a reserve. There's actually 2 reserves that we use. One is called Marataba, which is really beautiful. It's just got this mountain range backdrop. And even in that video, you can see the mountains in the background.
Yeah.
And then there's one down in the Eastern Cape called Kwandwe. And effectively what they're using is this artificial intelligence technology, which is obviously pervading the whole world at the moment. AI is going nuts. So we need to bring it into wildlife to protect these things. And rhinos are being shot out at a horrible rate. We've lost 3/4 of the population of rhinos in the last 12, 13 years, which is a scary, scary number. And these reserves have committed to try and look after these animals without removing their horn, because the horn is an instrumental part in their social dynamics and how they play things out. Obviously, removing the horn means that you're at least removing a lot of what is wanted by the poachers and by the illegal black market. But on the positive side is, if we can protect a reserve better and make sure that the rhinos are safe by using these AI bracelets, which measure and learn their behavior, it knows what their range is, so we're getting information back on that to feed back to research. But if there's any sudden movement or running or anything untoward, or the animal doesn't move for a prolonged period of time, the reserve management can get out there as soon as possible to try and apprehend anyone that has done anything. This is obviously a little bit reactive, but around these reserves, they've got AI cameras which are picking up vehicles. They tap into the police databases so they can pick up vehicles that may be stolen, or a vehicle that went in through one camera and didn't come out another, so that they can proactively get to those points so we don't have those problems. And these experiences, in the dollar sense, they're expensive, but they're not overly expensive. And that hands-on experience is just, you cannot compare seeing a rhino from 100 yards away versus being on foot, touching it, helping it, being part of that process.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's so cool that you allow people to be part of that experience. That's just such a cool thing. So again, just coming back to the name, Arc Earth, Arc stands for authentic, responsible, and connection. And I wondered if you could just touch on each one of those and the meaning that they bring to the experience that you provide.
100%, Scott. So it was interesting. My business partner, Matt, and I, we were sitting down. We'd come up with this idea. We'd gone through a name change and sort of fiddling with how do we come to a name that's going to represent who we are and what we wish to do. So we sat down with a exercise to work out our values as a company, as a partnership. And we worked through a whole list. So we just wrote down names of different feelings and different things we wish to get down. And we grouped them together. And our 3 core values were authentic, responsible, and connection. So we want to be authentic in what we put towards people so that they are getting what we promise them. We want to be responsible in the way that we put it forward, that we're positively benefiting the communities and the reserve that we're on, while again creating beautiful memories and empowering people to change their lives when they go home. And then the connection. In this day and age, with our connectivity on phones and computers and everything, we have lost the real connection, which is with Mother Nature. And we want to bring people back into that. We want to plug them back into that energy source, that thing that for me saved my life, quite literally, and just was a wonderful way to do that. And I think with so much mental health being brought to the fore, just being in nature is a beautiful place to be. So we want to connect people with that.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. I love that so much. And so oftentimes when we see connect, we think of connecting with one another, and I'm sure that there's great connection between people that happens on those trips. But you're speaking specifically of this connection with nature, which I just love so much. And one of the things that you and I got a chance to speak before today, and one of the things you shared with me in a previous conversation, I believe you said that some of the most spiritual experiences you've ever had have been with animals in nature. I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit. There's a number of things that people can find online. And I do want to just pause for a second, because there's so much we could talk about today. And I really want to encourage people to check out your YouTube channel, check out your website, because there is just so much content for people to be able to get inspired by the work that you're doing and some of these stories. But one in particular that I watched was a short film called Silverback. And I wonder if you could tell us about that.
So I was in a very positive position. I still do freelance work for an amazing American travel company called Natural Habitat Adventures, and I still have a lot of time with them. We still do a lot of trips with them, and they're very focused on group travel, but they've motivated myself and Matt to also take in that responsible side, the part of lifting things up. And they were coming out to do a film, luckily on myself, which is a little humbling and not so at the same time. But it was a beautiful time where we went out and we did all of these things. And the filmmaker, Andrew Ackerman, who's a very close friend of mine, we spent a lot of time out with the gorillas, and we were talking about my story. And I was very lucky in order to tell that story, and I think we'll get to it now. But as a guide, what leads you to be in nature, what led me to be in nature, was the loss of my parents, the loss of that connection with the greatest sense of family, and a deep depression that rolled out because of it, because I was stuck in a corporate world, living a life that I thought I wanted to lead, but it really wasn't that. And the Silverback, that movie gave me the opportunity to express that in a shortened form. Effectively, what happened was I was working as an environmental consultant. I knew that my life needed to tend towards nature. From a young age, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember sitting in the Pilanesberg, which is a game reserve about an hour and a half away from Johannesburg, and sitting there looking out onto the bush and going, I want to be a game ranger when I grow up. I want to be on that vehicle. And at that stage, I went with the guide, and my parents would stay back and enjoy a gin and tonic around the pool. And I'd be like, I'm out, I'm going to go and see what's going on. And I'd sit next to the guide, and the poor guy, I would just nibble on his ear the whole time, just absorbing everything he had to offer. And when I sat in this corporate world, writing reports, trying to explain things, which was a very important job in the greater sense of the environment, it just didn't bring me fire. It didn't fire me up to be the best I could be. And a little circle around with drugs and deep depression post my parents passing away in the tsunami, it led me to take a big jump, which was to follow a passion. The only place at that time when I was in my darkest place was the only time I found a little bit of light was when I went back to the Pilanesberg, where I had fallen in love with the bush. And I went there and I just felt joy. And I'd get up at 4 a.m., I'd pack sandwiches, and I'd be off, and I'd spend the whole day out there, and then I'd come back. And I think as a kid, we were taught that it was freedom to be there. I remember going to a family friend's farm, and we used to take a rifle with snake shot because they were all paranoid about snakes, and go walking for hours. There was no big game there, so nothing that was dangerous in terms of elephants, lions, leopards, buffalo, anything like that. So we'd just be free. We'd drive an old pickup, the clapped-out pickup that I had to sit in 4 boxes and look through the steering wheel, through the bottom of the steering wheel. Now, those memories were deep inside me. And when I left the corporate world and got back to this little farmhouse in the middle of a reserve called the Makalali, I felt at home. I'd moved from having my own house and a great salary to having nothing. I just kept my car and going and living and sharing a room with 4 other guys in a bunk beds. And I've never been happier in my life. And I even remember my first job or Sabi Sabi, which is one of the places I spent many, many years. And I remember my aunt coming through and seeing my house, which was a little round house, which had a pizza slice cut out of it, that the pizza slice was small enough that I could shit, shower, and shave it all at the same time. It was so small. And she burst into tears because I was living in such a small place and she couldn't understand it. I had a table as a bed with a mattress on it. I've never been happier. I never had curtains. Who needed it? I was up before it got light. I came back when it was dark, so it didn't make a difference. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So you touched on it, and I did kind of touch on it in the introduction as well. This is all triggered by a life-changing experience, the loss of your parents. And I wonder if you could and this is something that you cover in Silverback. And what I love about that is it's sort of like partly about the experience with the gorillas and then partly about your life's experience. But I wonder if you could just touch on what happened and this whole trigger and life event that sort of sent all this into motion.
So I think the biggest part of it was I was due to be there with my parents. My brother had already said, listen, I'm out. You guys go and enjoy Thailand. The 3 of you, I'm going away with my mates. We're going to have a party down in a beach city and you just carry on. And about a month before we were due to leave, my parents pulled me aside and said, can we chat to you? No, is it possible that we could maybe go by ourselves and you maybe join your brother? It was this awkward conversation from their side, but I was like, cool, that sounds amazing. You go have fun. They hadn't been on another holiday like that. It was like a second honeymoon for them since their honeymoon. So it was this really profound moment. And they'd gone off. And before they'd left, there were just coincidences everywhere. I remember I was already starting to smoked too much pot, and my parents were going, no, this is not cool. My parents couldn't understand this whole thing. It just wasn't floating the way it should have. And they had a big chat with me, and I said, I'm cool, Mom. Don't worry. I've got this. And we, even before, about 6 months before that, my dad and I had been at loggerheads because of my studies. We'd somehow found a way through that and cleared all of that air. And they left, they went. My brother and I were sitting at home Christmas Eve. We decided, okay, cool. We were going to go to friends' houses, both of those friends being named Ross, which is a little coincidental on its own. And we both smoked a joint that day, and we went, we don't want to go. You know what? We're actually going to stay at home. And that night they phoned us, and it was Christmas Day where they were. It was my dad's birthday, and it was the happiest I've ever heard them. And the next day, or 2 days later, in that sense, the 26th rolled in, and the tsunami rolled in too. And I remember a family friend phoning me, and she couldn't get me on my cell phone because it's like, it's 6 a.m. What are you phoning me for? And then phoned on the house phone when we still had those things called house phones. And she said, there's been a tsunami. And I just remember going, oh my God, it's happened. Like, I had a dream 3 days before that my house got flooded. And
Wow.
now this happened. And I was sitting there going, what? I know that they're gone. And it took us 6 months to find and identify their bodies. We had to send in DNA samples. My uncles went across. I wanted to, but they just said, no, there's no ways you're going. It'll scar you for life. And I thank my family so much for not letting me go, because,
Wow.
it'll change a person seeing so much death. And since then, they've always been with me, no matter how dark life got. But I think moving to the bush and seeing the interconnectedness of everything, of nature, of travel, of being out there on the road, and not being inside, hiding away, watching a television or being distracted by things, you see how purposeful life is. And nothing happens without reason. It all has a purpose. Every death has a purpose because it feeds something else. And in my case, that death fed a passion. It led me to spend time doing this and find the only way I could describe it, and I don't want it to sound arrogant, but there's a level of genius that I didn't have to work hard to retain information. It just flowed in, and I went, oh, wow, and then it stuck.
Yeah.
And through all of those things, and my university degree, my bosses before, they all taught me little tricks that allowed me to take these complex scientific things and tell cool stories about them. And my dad was the storyteller, so he taught me to tell the stories. And now I spend the time out there trying to show people this interconnectedness. And no matter how far away I get from civilization, it's amazing how when we're on a trip, there's always some level of depth that goes beyond what's happening in nature and what's happening at home. We always delve into the personal because you can't help it when you're sitting around a campfire and you're not distracted.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I noticed I think it was in Silverback, but when you were talking about this experience, I just made some notes about some things that I heard you say. And I heard you say, I thank God for every little connection that pushed me along the way. If they hadn't passed away, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I never would have found nature. Without the darkness, I couldn't find the light on the other end.
Hell yeah. I think, and that's the yin and the yang. Yeah. You cannot have light without darkness. You cannot experience everything beautifully. We're taught I was taught from a young age that we need to try and be happy. Whatever makes you happy, Richard, you can be anything that you want as long as you're happy. And I think that was a flawed statement in its general, because there's no such thing as perpetual happiness. We have to have the ups and the downs in order to find that. And you have to go down to go up to feel happy. So it's about finding that flow and just following your path. And that darkness keeps chasing me every now and again. I'll lie down, especially at my long time when I'm not distracted by trips and I'm stuck at home and I'm stuck in my own head. That darkness starts to chase me again. And I've got to find a way to focus on the positive, take in the negative, and just be part of it, just flow with it.
My impression is that nature and the connection with animals is on the positive side and helps with the healing.
Totally.
Yeah. So let's go back to Silverback, because there are two elements in that film. One is the sort of focus on the animals and the gorillas, and then one is your story. So let's touch on the gorillas and that connection. So part of that story is you're basically in this environment, experiencing this gorillas. You're almost like you're with them. It's not like you're hundreds of feet away watching them. I mean, you're literally sitting there with them. Like, what was that like?
The first time I went was overwhelming. You know, the hype of being with probably our closest relative in terms of evolution was monumental, and something that weighs 500 pounds and could snap you in half like you're a twig. And when you get there, they're like a bunch of Californian dope smokers. They are so chilled, and they're just chewing on leaves and interacting, and you watch the moms with the babies and you listen to the communication that goes on, and it's slightly overwhelming. And I've done it almost 150 times now, which is a good amount.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter how many times I go, I am always overwhelmed by them. Just sitting there with them. I remember one situation where we went into a group and I had to split my group in two. So one group went off to one group of gorillas, the other half went with me to this one, and then the next day I was going to swap around. And there was a 3-day-old baby, 3 days. And we got there and we were sitting with them, and the guides know me because I've been there a few times, and they're like, Richard, why don't you, while we're watching here, you go around, see if she'll let you see the baby. Because if she lets you, then the other guests can get in there. And I got in there, and every time I got close, she would just turn and hide the baby. And then I'd sneak around the other side, and then she'd turn and hide away again. So she was on this little motion, and eventually I was like, okay, cool, girl, you got this. I'll give you your space. Enjoy your baby. And we went back the next day with the other half of the group. Baby's now 4 days old, so 25% older, which is fantastic. And we sitting there, and the guide says to me, the local guide, he says to me, Richard, why don't you go again and go in and see if she'll let you? And I was like, if she's going to let me, let's let the guests get in there, because it's a tight space. I mean, there was probably going to be about 6 or 7 feet between me and her. And he's like, there's no way she'll let the others. You have to go, because she'll remember you from yesterday. And I walked in there, and I slowly made my way, and I got in front of her, and I sat down, and she was 7 feet in front of me. And she went like this and just opened the baby up and was like, there.
Wow.
And she showed me the baby. And she sat there for the next 2 hours while everyone else slept, just showing off her baby sleeping. No attempt to hide the baby. My wife was pregnant with my youngest. And I was overwhelmed with this real connection with her, because I knew that what she'd gone through, my wife's going to go through. And I could picture myself holding my son and being part of that. And it brought me to tears. I was truly emotional in that moment. It really is. The gorillas are something else.
She saw you, and she wanted you to see what she had. Yeah.
And it was a built-up trust. And it's what happens with these animals. And I think that's what makes the gorillas such an incredible thing to be part of. Because when we're on safari, we're in a vehicle 99% of the time. And if you're on foot, they either want to run away from you or kill you. That's the two ways it works, which is great because it provides beautiful nostalgia. You get a bit of adrenaline, you find your way through it, and we do it safely getting out on the other side. But the gorillas take about 2 to 2.5 years to habituate them. And once they're habituated, it's like you're part of their family. And I remember a story that a guide once recounted to me, one of the female guides in Rwanda, brilliant lady. She now lives in the States. And she was saying how they were on a guerrilla trek and they're following the family. Now, the family can have multiple silverbacks, but there's one big daddy. And he leads the group. He shows them where to go. He does all the bits and pieces. And he was leading them. And gorillas have a complex language, part of which we can understand, because if they go, it means stop. Don't come closer. You're too close. So he stopped and he started chuffing at us, or at this guide. They stopped and they watched and they stood back, and the whole family of gorillas came past. And every time one of them went past, he chuffed at them, and they went and did this loop around him like they were scared of him. Off they went round him. Understand, he's 500 pounds. I also wouldn't mess with him. But now everyone had gone and he wouldn't leave. And he kept on chuffing at the guides, looking them in the eyes and chuffing towards them. And one of the guides was like, okay, you guys just stay here. I want to see what's happening. And as she walked closer, she could see a poacher's snare that he was guarding the family from. And he wouldn't let anyone, he wouldn't leave there until the whole group of tourists had walked by too. So he wasn't just protecting his family, he was protecting the people that were following him too. Which I find incredible, that emotive, real connection. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. I mean, this connection, it's just so different from normal, like, human life and civilization. It's this connection. I mean, these are the spiritual experiences that you're talking about. I want to pivot from gorillas because there's one more that I need for listeners to hear, and that is this experience that you had with elephants. And I wonder if you could tell us about the elephant funeral. Totally.
So again, so many moments out there. And this was only 2 years ago that we were out. We were in a reserve called Mashatu. I'm visiting it twice next year, which I'm really excited about. It's a beautiful piece of Botswana, down right in the corner of Botswana, next to Zimbabwe and South Africa. And on the first day we had arrived, and there was a sort of an adolescent elephant that had passed away. Nobody knew how, but there were some lions feeding on it. There were hyenas surrounding it, lots of vultures. I mean, it's meat. It needs to be re-entered, and nothing gets wasted in nature. Everything has its purpose. Everything has its time, and the pecking order rolls through. So the lions were there the first night. They were mating because they now got full bellies and it's time to procreate. Then they left, then the hyenas came in, then the jackals, then the vultures. And over 3 days, we watched this carcass disappear. And on the last evening, we were leaving the next day for another beautiful spot in South Africa. And we were watching some lions that had been on this elephant carcass before. And we're like, okay, cool. This is average compared to what we've seen. So let's go finish that story. Let's go back to that elephant and see what's happening. And as we were driving in, there were these murmurations of tiny little birds, like yay big, called quilias. It's the most abundant bird on the planet. And at the height of breeding, there's probably around 10 trillion birds on the planet. And they flock in millions. And they were just floating across the sky in these big murmurations, going to the roosting spot. And we were very close to the carcass, and I could hear snapping of branches, and there were some elephants moving in. So I said, guys, I can hear elephants coming. Let's go to the carcass. And as we got to the carcass, this herd of elephant walked in, and they started chasing all the vultures away, chased the jackals away. The youngsters were busy trumpeting and pushing, and you heard this low-level grumble that elephants make, this like, which is a infrasound. It goes through the ground, and they can communicate with one another for miles, up to 10 miles. And the big matriarch, she sort of walked up to us, and they were moving the bones around. And I'd explained this all to the guests, that elephants have been known to move bones after the fact, and that they can mourn their dead. You know, this is all theoretical. I've read this. It's all part of theory. And she came right up to us. They chased everyone else away, and she was looking at us straight in the eye and sort of waving her leg. And when they go on 3 legs and they're waving it like that, it's a thing that they're thinking. They're considering whether to charge you or not. So we all sat quietly. Nobody said a word. And she stopped and she went back, and suddenly everything got quiet. And she went back to the carcass, and the rest of the elephants went around her in a big circle, and they started to rumble. Again, that, and there was silence. And we knew that they were mourning, that they were saying goodbye to this animal. Not one of us said a word. Not one person asked a question. Everyone just sat and immersed themselves in this feeling, because it was a feeling. I have goosebumps just talking about it.
So do I.
And as quickly as it started, it ended. And they all just picked up and very quietly moved off into the bush. And this is a crazy thing when you see 12 elephants move through the bush without making a sound, just dead silent, like they've got ninja slippers on or something. And we'd watched this whole thing, and I turned around and there was not a dry eye in the house. Everyone was crying. There were just tissues and sniffling, and everyone just knew that they'd been part of something special. And that matriarch had come straight to us and looked us straight in the eye and went, okay, you're cool. You can stay. And that's the only way I can explain it. I might be anthropomorphizing it, but that's my feeling, and I'm going with that because it's
yeah. Cool. No, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, obviously, it wasn't just you; that the entire group of people that you're with felt the same thing.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
very much, and you become connected to that. I think just being in nature for longer than a day starts to couple you in with everything, and you start rolling with what is.
It's so beautiful. I really love that story, and people, you can watch it over and over again on YouTube. It's such a great story, and you're a master storyteller as well. One of the things that is one of your gifts, along with guiding, is photography, and so you're also prolific in shooting the wildlife and sharing these images and really trying to be a storyteller with your camera. And one of the things that you said was that connecting people with the experience of being next to a gorilla or an elephant is something that you hope to do for people that wouldn't otherwise get that opportunity. And so I just kind of wondered if we could touch on that a little bit. And then, but also I want to kind of want to go in another direction, which is to speak to like the difference between what a photograph can convey and the direct experience itself.
Totally. So I understand that what I do is very privileged, and a lot of these safaris come with a cost sense that 99% of the planet probably wouldn't be able to enjoy or to be part of.
Yeah.
And through photography, I'm able, and now videography, as the skill set grows, I'm able to share these moments and share stories and information with a broader audience that allows them to better understand how incredible these animals are, to understand the complexity of them rather than just being a lion that has sharp teeth and kills things, but that the social lives are really towards one another, that a 500-pound gorilla that could snap you in half has an emotional connection to the people that it is part of, that are coming to see it once a day for 1 hour. Those people that are never able to get out there can look at it and fall in love with it, because I do not believe that we will ever try to save something we don't love. You look at our connection to our pets. The world has loads of pets, and we are willing to move heaven and earth to keep our pets alive just because we love them. So I believe that photos and videos can give people that same feeling, can connect them to that in some way, shape, or form. And that's my little piece that I can offer them, because not everyone's going to get there. But the difference in being next to that animal when a lion walks down the side of your vehicle, or a silverback walks past and gives you a little palm off and knocks you over, saying, listen, I want to go there and you might be a little bit in my way. Words, photos A video will go viral, but it'll never explain that feeling. The smell of a gorilla, that it's got a sweet body odor smell to it. The smell of a wild dog, an African wild dog that smells like wet dog, but you can smell it 10 minutes after they've walked past a place. The sound of a lion roaring, because it's not a sound, it's a feeling. Those are things that you could never, ever capture in a photo or a video. You have to be there to experience it.
I love this so much. You know, one of the things that you shared with me was that you believe that as a guide, your job is to interpret what the animal is doing and how they fit into the environment. And, you know, sort of telling this story and sharing this experience with the people as they're experiencing it. And it just makes me think about like people as animals, because you're taking people into this environment and sharing that. But like, I guess I'm just curious, like if the tables were turned, what would be the story that you would tell about people? In other words, if you were to come into a human's habitat with a group of curious humans to witness what they're doing, what would be that story that you would tell?
Scott, it's a great question. And I think the truth of it is if you go sit in a bar and you watch humans interacting, they interact like wildlife. You see the testosterone, you see the estrogen, you see people trying to be noticed, you see people interacting, you see groups and community, you also see the individuals. And no matter how different we think we are to animals, the more you study animals and see them, the more you understand that we are also animals. And it's the one thing that we as humans have done is we've separated ourselves from the animal world, the First Nations, the Bushmen, the Inuits, the Aborigines, all of these amazing First Nations were all connected to that. They were part of that system. They understood that they were part of that system. We now look at it from outside and think we're different, but we're not. The sooner we realize that, the easier it will be for us to understand why we do what we do and be able to deal with those things and at least move forward as a community.
Thank you for that. I love this conversation so much. How would the story be different in the bar or, you know, in the streets of New York City where people are just whizzing by, jumping into cabs, going in and out of buildings, like just living that busy life? And the group of people that's on a safari with you witnessing nature. You know, if I was a group of people looking at both of those sets of people, what would be the story? What's the difference between the story?
The difference is presence. If you go watch the whizzing in New York, everyone is aimlessly trying to get to the next point.
Yeah.
In wildlife and animals, they're not. They're happy to wait for the next moment. In fact, it's important not to waste the energy trying to get to the next moment, but just be in the present and be part of the moment that you're in. And it's funny enough, beginning of this year, towards the end of last year, I had this real deep epiphany about how we work. And if I look at a lion sleeps 20 hours a day. Now, a lot of people go, geez, that's a cool life, but that'll be pretty boring. But they're confining their working hours to a small amount of time. But when they start those working hours, they give 100% dedication to that. And when they chase after something, they will give 110% energy to trying to catch and get to the goal of getting a next meal. But once they've done that, they will go back to relax. And all we do now is we keep moving the goalpost and we keep jumping. Okay, we got that one. Now next. And we don't have the reserves or the time to just sit. When was the last time you saw somebody in New York just sitting? You probably find one sitting on a park bench somewhere, just watching the world go by. That's more animal-like. But everyone else is chasing. We're all chasing after something. And we have to slow down. I remember a saying which says we all overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10.
Right.
And sometimes we just need to slow down and realize that there's 10 years to do it in, not just one.
I love that. I was good. The question, what is the learning, was going to roll off my tongue, and you just flowed right into that. So I love this piece about slowing down, but it raises another question, because one of the things that I heard you say, again, I think in Silverback, was if I could teach my kids anything, it would be that they could do whatever they want if they can find their purpose. And I'm just curious, having been through this whole life experience that you've had, from the tsunami, going through the darkness, and then ultimately finding your calling, what would your advice be for people on how to go about that pursuit of finding their purpose?
Yeah, I think the word purpose is defined in our brains as something of grandeur, something really big and monumental that changes the whole planet. But we forget that purpose can be something very simple. Just raising kids is a purpose. It's one of my purposes, is to raise self-aware children. And if I can change that, or not change, but better that one life by giving that little human the knowledge that happiness is not something attained, it's not something that is a destination, but happiness is the adventure we go on through life, and how we interact with that adventure and the people that come into that. Purpose doesn't have to be firing off rockets into space or catching them now. It doesn't have to be being a president. It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be as simple as taking one person that's a little down on their luck and moving them forward, or moving yourself, because you may be the one that's down on your luck and needs a push forward, where the darkness might be chasing you for a bit. And it's worth just taking that next step and enjoying the journey, like really enjoying the journey.
Rich, you are living your calling. I mean, you're a guide, you're a leader, and that is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I just feel it. I feel it coming from you. It is amazing. You are a guide. And in fact, people can join you on adventures in Africa. Could you tell us a little bit more about your guide services, places that you go, and how people can get involved?
Yeah, sure. So we do custom built trips for anyone from one person to bigger groups. But for the most part, it's privately bespoke, organized. So we organize everything from having a face-to-face chat with people, and we go, okay, cool, what do you want out of this? And then hand-picking properties that we have personally been to numerous times, understanding what the outcome is going to be. And we organize all the little bits in between. Sometimes it's guided by us or by some of our other guides. Sometimes it's just at your own steam, because different people have different needs. But we organize everything from start to finish, so that when they get there, a person feels comfortable, no matter that they're far away, especially in Africa, which can seem deep and dark at times. But we do everything across the whole of Africa, from gorillas to migration to South Africa to deserts to you name it. And we're expanding further afield. So let us know. You can go onto our website or hook us up on social media, and we'll be happy to guide you through that.
That's amazing. So what would the next steps be for somebody that wants to find more, if they want to connect with you or just get more information?
You could jump onto arcearth.net, which is our website, and send us an email through there, or contact me directly on rich@arcearth.net, or go through our social media platforms, send us a message, and we will set up a call with you so that we can understand what you want out of it, and hopefully book you a trip of a lifetime that has purpose built in, and you get to do something amazing and create memories at the same time.
Rich, I want to come do a trip with you. It sounds amazing. And for those listening too, please check out some of Rich's YouTube videos, check out Instagram, like so good, so deep. And just this connection with nature. I can feel it. I can literally feel it with you. You've lived this big life. I mean, it's just so full of ups and downs. And I mean, at some point, Rich, Hollywood is going to pick up on your story, and they're going to want to make a movie about you. And I want to know, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie?
I think I'd probably have to say someone like Ryan Reynolds, just because
Nice.
I need somebody who's better looking than I am, and
Love
has
it.
a little bit of quip and humor to it, because life's too serious to be serious.
I love it.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds, perfect. Okay, what's your movie going to be called?
Oh, probably The Lone Ranger.
Oh, The Lone Ranger. You wanted to be a ranger, also meaning a guide your entire life, and it is now manifested. So The Lone Ranger, starring Ryan Reynolds. I love this. This is going to be an awesome movie.
Amazing.
Rich, thank you. This has been such a fun conversation. I really appreciate you spending the time with me today. For those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Rich's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Rich, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Scott.